There are rap beefs, and then there are moments that make the entire hip-hop culture go silent. And what just happened between Boosie Badazz, T.I., King Harris, and 50 Cent was one of those moments where the internet didn't just react. It froze, because things escalated past trolling, past diss tracks, past Instagram jokes, and straight into territory hip-hop has historically treated as sacred. It started like many rap feuds do, with ego, pride, and a few slick posts online. But within hours, the situation spiraled into something darker when King Harris jumped on live and fired off words that instantly shook the culture, telling 50 Cent to go dig up his mother. A line so brutal that even people who enjoy rap drama started saying the same thing. That line should never have been crossed. The moment those words hit the internet, timelines exploded, group chats lit up. And suddenly the conversation wasn't about versus battles or lyrical competition anymore. It was about respect, family, and the unspoken rules that have existed in hip-hop for decades. And just when it looked like the situation couldn't get any wilder, Boosie Badazz stepped in and dropped his opinion. And if you know Boosie, you know he's not the type to sugarcoat anything. What he said didn't just criticize one side, it shook the entire situation. So calling out how things had spiraled into a level you can't come back from, warning that once dead parents are dragged into the conversation, the beef stops being entertainment and starts becoming something much more dangerous. Now the culture is watching closely because what started as online trolling between two rap legends has turned into a multi-layered war involving families, street codes, generational pride, and the unpredictable energy of a young man defending his mother in public. And the uncomfortable truth everyone is realizing right now is simple. Once a beef reaches this level, there is no easy way to end it. To understand how this situation exploded the way it did, you have to go back years before the moment 50 Cent posted anything about Tamika Tiny Harris. The tension between T.I. and 50 Cent didn't start with insults or family shots. It started with pride, legacy, and one simple question that hip-hop fans had been debating for years. Who actually has the stronger catalogue? Ever since the pandemic era when versus battles became one of the most exciting events in music culture, T.I. had been openly campaigning for a battle with 50, in interviews, on social media, and even in live conversations. And Tip kept repeating the same idea, that his discography, from Rubber Band Man to What You Know, from Live Your Life to Bring 'Em Out, could stand toe-to-toe with anything 50 ever released. To him, this wasn't disrespect, it was competition. But to 50 Cent, who built his reputation on dominance and psychological warfare, the suggestion of a versus battle didn't feel like friendly competition. It felt like someone questioning his status. And if there is one thing the hip-hop world knows about 50 Cent, it's that when he feels challenged, he rarely responds with diplomacy. He responds with trolling. For years, that trolling stayed within the normal boundaries of rap beef. 50 would post memes. He would dig up old clips. He would joke about rumors that T.I. had cooperated with authorities in a past case, a claim that has floated around hip-hop conversations for years without ever fully disappearing. Meanwhile, T.I. kept pushing the musical angle, insisting that a versus battle would settle everything. Fans watched the back and forth like a long-running sports rivalry. Some people sided with New York and 50's legacy of explosive hits like In Dar Club and Many Men. Others believed the Atlanta legend's deep catalogue would dominate a live battle environment. For a long time, the tensions stayed entertaining. It was the type of rivalry that hip-hop fans love. Competitive, loud, but still contained within music and jokes. But there's a pattern with 50 Cent that many artists have learned the hard way. When he decides to escalate, he does it with precision. Instead of arguing about songs or industry numbers, he targets emotions. He targets weaknesses. And this time, the escalation came when he posted an image mocking Tiny Harris on his massive Instagram platform. The message behind the post was simple but cutting. Stay out of grown folks' business. To some people, it looked like just another trolling moment from 50 Cent. the same internet villain who has spent decades roasting rappers, actors, and even television executives. But to the Harris family, it felt like something different. Tiny wasn't a rapper. She wasn't part of the debate. She was a wife and a mother who had nothing to do with the feud. And in hip-hop culture, bringing family members into a conflict has always been considered crossing a line. That's where King Harris entered the story. Our king had grown up watching his father navigate the music industry and defend his reputation. He had seen how hip-hop culture places enormous importance on respect, especially when it comes to family. So when he saw the post about his mother circulating across social media, he reacted the way many young men do when they feel their family is under attack. He reacted instantly and emotionally. Instead of waiting for his father to address it, instead of letting the situation cool down, King jumped on Instagram Live and started speaking directly to 50 Cent. What followed was one of the most shocking moments of the entire feud. King didn't just defend his mother, he went straight for the most painful part of 50 Cent's personal history, the death of his mother, Sabrina Jackson, who died in a tragic house fire when he was a child. Within seconds, the internet realized something serious had happened. The energy changed. So hip-hop fans who normally laugh at online beef suddenly started debating whether the situation had gone too far. Some people understood why King exploded. They argued that defending your mother is instinctive, something deeply rooted in both street culture and family loyalty. Others felt the comment about digging up a deceased parent's grave crossed a line that should never be crossed. In rap history, insults have always been brutal. But certain boundaries, especially involving dead family members, carry a different kind of weight. At the same time, the generational gap between the people involved made the situation even more complicated. On one side was 50 Cent, a veteran rapper turned media mogul with decades of experience manipulating internet drama. On the other side was King Harris, a young artist still trying to establish himself, suddenly standing in the middle of one of the biggest conflicts of his life. The power imbalance was obvious. 50 had built an entire career out of trolling and psychological warfare, turning feuds with artists like Ja Rule and The Game into long-running narratives that kept his name trending for years. King, meanwhile, was stepping into the battlefield for the first time, driven more by emotion than strategy. Then came the moment that pushed the story even further. King decided not just to argue online, but to turn the conflict into music. He recorded a diss track called Made Man and released it across streaming platforms, complete with a video showing him surrounded by luxury cars and delivering direct shots at 50 Cent. Suddenly, what started as a family defense became a full-blown rap confrontation. Fans began dissecting every lyric, every post, and every reaction from both sides. Podcasts debated who was right. Comment sections filled with arguments about hip-hop ethics. And in the middle of all that noise, another voice finally stepped into the conversation. The voice many people were waiting for. That voice belonged to Boosie Badass. Boosie wasn't just another rapper sharing an opinion. He was someone who had lived through the realities behind the culture's unwritten rules. He had experienced prison, street codes, and the consequences of letting emotions control situations that can spiral out of control. So when Boosie finally addressed the conflict, people listened closely. His reaction didn't fully defend either side. Instead, he acknowledged something deeper. He understood why King reacted the way he did, because protecting your mother is instinctive. But at the same time, he warned that once someone brings up a deceased parent in a feud, the damage becomes almost impossible to undo. That statement became the emotional center of the entire situation. Because suddenly the question wasn't who won the argument or who had the better diss track. The question became something heavier. When a conflict reaches this level of personal pain, can anyone actually win? The situation truly detonated the moment King Harris pressed the Go Live button, because in that instant, what had been a slow-burning rivalry between TY and 50 Cent transformed into something raw, emotional, and impossible to rewind. Thousands of people watched the live stream in real time, but within minutes the clips were everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, X, YouTube, each replay spreading the same explosive moment that made fans realize the feud had crossed into dangerous territory. King wasn't speaking like a rapper preparing a calculated diss track. He sounded like a son defending his mother with pure emotion. His voice carried the anger of someone who felt his family had been publicly humiliated. And that energy came through in every sentence. The internet didn't just hear his words, they felt the intensity behind them. When he shouted about respecting his mother and demanded that 50 Cent stop playing with his family, it wasn't framed as entertainment anymore. It sounded personal, immediate, and completely uncontrolled. But the moment that truly shook hip-hop culture was when King aimed straight at 50's deepest wound, his mother. The comment about digging up her grave instantly changed the atmosphere around the entire conflict. Fans who normally treat rap beef like a sport suddenly began debating whether the situation had gone too far. Because hip-hop has always thrived on ruthless competition. Artists insult each other's music, careers, and even personal habits all the time. But certain lines, especially involving deceased family members, carry a heavier cultural weight. When those lines are crossed, the tone shifts from rivalry to something darker. What made the moment even more intense was how fearless King sounded while saying it. There was no hesitation in his voice, no sense that he might regret the words later. Instead, he doubled down on the message that defending his mother mattered more than any internet consequences. To him, the situation wasn't about clout or publicity. It was about respect. He made it clear that where he comes from, disrespecting someone's mother is one of the worst possible insults. And that belief is deeply rooted in both Southern street culture and family traditions. In King's mind, responding aggressively wasn't reckless. It was necessary. Meanwhile, the internet reacted like it always does when drama reaches nuclear levels. It split into sides. One group defended King completely, arguing that any son would react the same way if someone publicly embarrassed his mother in front of millions of followers. They pointed out that 50 Cent had dragged Tiny Harris into a conflict that originally had nothing to do with her. To them, King's anger was understandable even if the words were harsh. But another group saw things differently. They believed King had made a mistake by escalating the conflict with someone as experienced in public feuds as 50 Cent. Because if there is one thing the hip-hop world knows about 50, it's that he rarely loses battles of psychological warfare. And that's where the first shocking twist appeared. Instead of immediately responding with rage or threats, 50 Cent stayed quiet for a moment. For someone known as one of the internet's most relentless trolls, that silence felt strange. Fans expected instant retaliation. They expected memes, insults, or a brutal post aimed directly at King Harris. But the response didn't come right away. That pause created tension across social media. More comment sections filled with speculation about what 50 might do next. Would he escalate further? Would he ignore the young rapper entirely? Or would he turn the situation into another long-running feud that kept everyone talking for months? Then another twist dropped. King Harris took the conflict beyond livestream insults and turned it into music. Instead of letting the moment fade away, he entered the studio and recorded a diss track called Made Man. The release changed the entire narrative again. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about a heated livestream argument. It was about a young artist stepping into the ring with one of hip-hop's most experienced fighters. The music video showed King standing confidently among luxury cars, delivering aggressive lyrics aimed directly at 50 Cent. The message behind the track was clear. He wasn't backing down. That decision shocked many people watching from the outside, because turning the argument into music meant the feud could last much longer. Diss tracks have historically kept rap battles alive for months or even years. And by releasing one, King signaled that he wasn't just defending his mother in the moment, he was declaring war in the language hip-hop understands best. bars. But that move also introduced a new risk. By entering the battlefield through music, King had stepped directly into 50 Cent's territory. Even though 50 has focused more on business and television in recent years, his reputation as a ruthless opponent in rap conflicts still looms large. He built his career destroying rivals publicly, from Ja Rule to The Game, often using both music and psychological tactics to dominate the narrative. Facing someone with that level of experience isn't just another rap challenge, it's stepping into a storm. And as the diss track spread across streaming platforms, another unexpected factor entered the story. Older voices from hip-hop culture began weighing in. Veteran artists, podcast hosts, and commentators started discussing the situation with a tone that sounded less like entertainment and more like concern. Many of them acknowledged that King's reaction came from loyalty and emotion, but they also warned that conflicts involving family can escalate quickly and unpredictably. That's when the name Boosie Badazz started appearing everywhere in the conversation. Fans wanted to know what Boosie thought because he represents a generation of hip-hop that grew up with strict codes about respect, family, and street consequences. His opinion carried weight precisely because he had seen firsthand what happens when emotions and pride spiral into real-world conflicts. When Boosie finally addressed the situation, the tension surrounding the feud shifted again. Because instead of cheering the chaos or dismissing it as entertainment, he delivered a message that sounded more like a warning. He acknowledged that King's anger made sense. Any son would feel furious seeing his mother publicly mocked. But he also emphasized something the entire culture understands. Once someone brings up a deceased parent in a conflict, the damage becomes extremely difficult to repair. That comment hung over the entire situation like a dark cloud. Because suddenly the question wasn't about who started the fight or who delivered the sharpest insult. The question was whether the conflict had already reached a point where reconciliation might be impossible. And just as the debate around Boosie's words started spreading across hip-hop media, another twist began forming behind the scenes, one that would pull even more people into the drama and push the feud into an even more chaotic direction. Once the diss track dropped and the live stream clips spread across every corner of the internet, the situation between 50 Cent, T.I., and King Harris stopped being just a feud between individuals. It turned into a full-blown cultural event that dragged the entire hip-hop ecosystem into the conversation. Podcast hosts, DJs, rappers, bloggers and fans all started analysing every detail like investigators studying evidence. Suddenly, every Instagram post, every deleted comment, every subtle caption was treated like a clue revealing who might strike next. And in the middle of all that chaos, another voice stepped forward with an opinion that changed the tone of the debate completely. Boosie Badazz. Boosie didn't approach the situation like someone chasing viral moments. When he spoke about the conflict, his tone carried the weight of someone who had seen where situations like this can lead. He began by acknowledging something many people online were ignoring. King Harris was reacting emotionally because his mother had been publicly disrespected. According to Boosie, that reaction was understandable. In many communities, a mother isn't just another family member. She represents the foundation of the household, the person who raised you and protected you. In that environment, defending your mother is not optional. It's expected. But then Boosie shifted the conversation in a way that made everyone listening uncomfortable. He pointed out that while defending family is natural, the words used during that defense can create consequences that last far longer than the moment itself. When King told 50 Cent to dig up his mother's grave, Boosie described it as heavy, dark energy, something that can permanently alter a conflict. In hip-hop culture, insults are common, but deceased parents represent one of the few boundaries that many artists still respect. Crossing that line doesn't just escalate a feud, it changes the emotional stakes of the entire situation. As Boosie continued speaking, He also reminded listeners of something people often forget about 50 Cent. Trolling is his specialty. For over 2 decades, 50 has mastered the art of turning conflicts into entertainment. He did it during his legendary feud with Ja Rule, where social media posts and memes helped him dominate the narrative. He did it again during clashes with Rick Ross, Floyd Mayweather, and countless other celebrities. Boosie explained that people who react emotionally to 50's trolling often end up giving him exactly what he wants: attention and chaos. And that realization created the second major twist in the story. Instead of escalating the fight immediately, 50 Cent suddenly went quiet online. Our posts referencing the Harris family began disappearing from his Instagram page. The pictures and captions that had fueled the argument were quietly removed. To many fans watching the drama unfold, that move looked suspiciously like damage control. Some people interpreted it as a sign that 50 realized the situation had spiraled too far. Others believed it was simply another strategic move from someone who understands how to manipulate public attention. Meanwhile, the situation became even more complicated when Boosie's own family unexpectedly got involved. His son, Torrance "Tootie" Raw Hatch Jr., jumped into the conversation online, warning King Harris to calm down and suggesting that things could escalate if the young rapper kept pushing the conflict. Instead of cooling things down, that comment triggered another wave of tension. King Harris responded by questioning Boosie's authority to lecture him about respect or behavior. Just like that. What began as a two-sided feud suddenly had multiple camps involved. The argument was no longer just between 50 Cent and the Harris family. It had turned into a tangled web of alliances, reactions, and side conflicts spreading across the hip-hop community. At the same time, media personalities began weighing in with their own interpretations. Some believed T.I. had actually gained momentum in the conflict because he responded through music rather than social media. His diss tracks, War and Right One, reminded listeners that despite his years in the industry, he could still deliver sharp lyrical attacks. Others argued that 50 Cent didn't even need to respond musically because his power comes from controlling the conversation online. But the most interesting shift wasn't happening in the studios or on Instagram. It was happening in public perception. For years, 50 Cent had built an image as hip-hop's ultimate internet villain, the guy who could roast anyone without consequences. But this time the narrative looked different. Many fans felt dragging Tiny Harris into the conflict had been unnecessary. They believed the feud should have stayed between the rappers themselves. That opinion created a wave of sympathy for the Harris family, particularly for King Harris, who many people now saw not as a reckless young artist, but as a son reacting emotionally to defend his mother. Still, the question hanging over the entire situation remained unresolved. Would 50 Cent respond again? Because anyone familiar with his history knows he rarely lets a feud disappear quietly. When he decides to engage, he usually does it with surgical precision: a single post, a single joke, or a single clip that flips the narrative back in his favor. That possibility kept fans refreshing their timelines, waiting for the next move. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, tension continued building as each side prepared for whatever might come next. Diss tracks were still circulating. Podcast discussions were still dissecting every detail. And with multiple families now involved, the conflict felt less like entertainment and more like a powder keg waiting for another spark. The situation had reached a point where the entire hip-hop world was asking the same question. Was this feud about to explode even further? Or had everyone already crossed a line that could never truly be repaired? By the time the dust from the live stream and diss tracks started settling, the fallout had already spread far beyond the people directly involved. What began as a conflict between 50 Cent and T.I. had now pulled fans, commentators, and even other artists into a heated debate about respect, family, and the unwritten rules of hip-hop. Everywhere people gathered to talk about music, podcasts, barbershops, Twitter threads, YouTube comment sections, the same question kept appearing. Who actually crossed the line first? Some people believed the answer was obvious. They argued that 50 Cent had triggered the entire situation by publicly mocking Tamika "Tiny" Harris, someone who had never been part of the feud to begin with. To them, that move violated a long-standing code within hip-hop culture: keep family out of it. In that perspective, King Harris didn't start the war. He simply reacted to protect his mother. Many fans saw his anger as the predictable reaction of a son raised in an environment where loyalty to family is treated as sacred. But another group of observers felt the story wasn't that simple. They argued that even though defending family is understandable, sure, bringing up someone's deceased parent creates damage that can't easily be undone. In their view, King's words changed the emotional temperature of the conflict permanently. It transformed a messy rap beef into something far more personal. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about music anymore. It was about grief, trauma, and respect for the dead. This debate spread like wildfire across hip-hop media. Major podcasts began breaking down every moment of the feud, in analysing the language used by each side and questioning whether the culture itself had changed. Some commentators said the situation reflected a generational shift in how younger artists approach conflict: more emotional, more immediate, less concerned with traditional boundaries. Others argued that the same rules still apply, but social media accelerates everything so quickly that people react before thinking. Meanwhile, T.I. found himself in a complicated position. And as the father of King Harris and the husband of Tiny, he had every reason to be furious about the way his family had been dragged into the spotlight. At the same time, he was also a veteran of the industry who understood how public conflicts can spiral out of control. His diss tracks had already reignited his lyrical reputation, reminding fans that he could still step into the booth and deliver aggressive bars when necessary. But the deeper issue now wasn't about music. It was about whether the situation could be contained before it damaged everyone involved. Behind the scenes, people close to the Harris family reportedly encouraged calm. They understood that once emotions run too high in public, it becomes difficult to walk things back without looking weak. Pride plays a powerful role in hip-hop culture, and both sides had already taken very public positions. If either side backed down too quickly, the critics would frame it as surrender. At the same time, 50 Cent continued doing something that frustrated many observers. He refused to respond directly in a dramatic way. Instead of launching a full attack, he let the internet continue debating the situation while he focused on subtle posts and indirect comments. That strategy is something he has perfected over the years. By allowing others to argue on his behalf or against him, he keeps the story alive without appearing desperate for attention. And that tactic worked exactly the way it always does. The longer 50 stayed quiet, the more people speculated about what he might do next. Some fans predicted he would eventually respond with a brutal joke that flipped the narrative again. Others believed he might simply move on, letting the controversy fade while the Harris family continued dealing with the emotional aftermath. But the emotional impact of the situation was already visible. Interviews and social media posts from people close to the Harris family suggested that the online chaos had taken a real toll. Being at the center of a viral controversy isn't just a digital experience. It affects real relationships, real emotions, and real reputations. The constant flood of opinions from strangers can make any situation feel even more intense. Meanwhile, older voices within hip-hop began expressing concern about the direction the culture was heading. Several veteran artists pointed out that social media has blurred the line between performance and real life. In earlier eras, rap beef usually played out through songs, interviews, and occasional confrontations. Today, conflicts unfold in real time, with millions of people watching every reaction. That kind of pressure can push people to escalate situations faster than they normally would. And as the conversation kept spreading, one uncomfortable truth became harder to ignore. Nobody involved seemed to be walking away from the situation with a clear victory. 50 Cent had once again proven his ability to dominate the internet conversation. T.I. had reminded the world that he could still deliver powerful diss tracks. King Harris had demonstrated fierce loyalty to his mother, but the emotional cost of the conflict continued rising for everyone involved. The culture itself seemed divided between those who treated the feud as entertainment and those who saw it as a warning sign about how far public conflicts can escalate when pride and family collide. And just when it seemed like the story might slowly fade into another chapter of hip-hop history, a final twist began emerging, one that would leave fans questioning whether this feud had actually reached its end, or if the most shocking development was still waiting around the corner. Just when it seemed like the chaos surrounding 50 Cent, T.I., King Harris, and Boosie Badazz might finally start cooling down, something unexpected happened that shifted the entire narrative again. The internet began noticing a quiet but deliberate change in behavior from 50 Cent himself. For someone known as one of the most relentless trolls in entertainment history, he suddenly stopped feeding the drama the way people expected. Posts that referenced the Harris family quietly disappeared from his page. The jokes slowed down. The direct shots vanished. And for the first time since the feud exploded, the internet started asking a different question. Why did 50 Cent suddenly step back? At first, some fans assumed it was simply another calculated move from a man who understands internet psychology better than almost anyone in hip-hop. After all, 50 Cent built his reputation by controlling narratives. He knows when to strike and when to let silence do the work. By pulling back, he allowed the conversation to keep spinning without needing to add fuel himself. But as the days passed, a deeper theory started circulating among fans and commentators. What if the reason for the sudden silence wasn't strategy at all? What if it was something more serious, something behind the scenes that forced everyone involved to reconsider how far the situation had gone? Because here's the reality many people began pointing out. Once the conflict involved family members and deceased parents, the emotional stakes became unpredictable. Situations like that can escalate beyond social media very quickly. Industry insiders and veteran artists reportedly began advising caution. They understood that the line between entertainment and real-life conflict had become dangerously thin. When pride, grief, and public humiliation mix together in front of millions of viewers, things can spiral into places nobody wants to see. At the same time, another surprising development began circulating online. Fans noticed that T.I. had shifted his tone slightly in interviews and public appearances. While he continued promoting his music and standing behind his family, he also emphasized the importance of growth and maturity when dealing with conflict. Some listeners interpreted that message as a subtle signal that he didn't want the situation to escalate further. Others believed it was simply the perspective of someone who had already lived through enough industry drama to know how destructive long-term feuds can become. But perhaps the most intriguing part of the story was the way the public conversation evolved. Instead of focusing purely on insults and diss tracks, people started discussing the deeper meaning of the conflict. Commentators began asking whether the entire situation reflected a larger shift happening inside hip-hop culture. Social media has made every disagreement visible to millions of people instantly. Young artists now grow up watching conflicts play out in real time, often feeling pressure to respond immediately instead of letting cooler heads prevail. In that environment, King Harris found himself standing at a crossroads. His decision to defend his mother had earned him respect from many people who admired his loyalty. At the same time, it had also pulled him into a battle with one of the most experienced figures in the industry. Whether he intended it or not, he had stepped into the kind of high-profile confrontation that can shape an artist's reputation for years. Meanwhile, Boosie Badazz continued reminding audiences about something many people were overlooking: the real-world consequences of letting pride control your decisions. In interviews and online discussions, he repeated the same warning. Once conflicts reach a certain level of personal disrespect, there is rarely a clean way to end them. Someone always ends up carrying the emotional scars long after the internet moves on to the next story. And that realization created the final twist of the entire situation. Because the more people analyzed what had happened, the clearer it became that this feud might never actually receive a traditional ending. There might not be a dramatic reconciliation. There might not be a final diss track that settles everything. Instead, the story could simply fade into the long history of hip-hop conflicts that never truly resolved, lingering in the background whenever the names involved appear in the same conversation again. But even as the public debate slowly began shifting away from daily updates about the feud, one question refused to disappear. It lingered in interviews, comment sections, and late-night conversations among fans who had watched the drama unfold from the beginning. What happens the next time these two worlds collide? Because the truth about hip-hop culture is that rivalries rarely stay buried forever. The same artists cross paths at award shows, festivals, and industry events year after year. Cameras flash, microphones appear. And sometimes the smallest moment, a glance, a comment, a lyric, can reignite a fire everyone thought had already burned out. Or which means the most unsettling possibility remains this: the story between 50 Cent and the Harris family may not actually be finished at all. After everything that unfolded between 50 Cent, T.I., King Harris, and Boosie Badazz, one thing became painfully clear. This situation wasn't just another rap beef for entertainment. It became a mirror reflecting the complicated reality of modern hip-hop culture. Pride, loyalty, family, respect, and social media pressure all collided in a way that forced fans to confront uncomfortable questions. Because when you strip away the memes, the diss tracks, and the viral clips, the core issue behind this entire conflict is something deeply human. How far should someone go when defending their family? For some people watching the drama unfold, the answer feels obvious. They believe King Harris did exactly what any son should do when someone disrespects his mother in public. And in that perspective, loyalty to family comes before fame, before industry politics, and before internet consequences. To them, his reaction represented something real and authentic in a world where many artists hide behind publicists and carefully crafted statements. But others look at the same moment and see a different lesson. They believe emotions can push people into saying things that create damage lasting far longer than the argument itself. When a feud reaches the level of bringing up deceased parents, many people feel the situation crosses into territory where reconciliation becomes nearly impossible. And that's the part of this story that continues haunting the culture long after the headlines fade. Because hip-hop has always been built on competition and confrontation. From lyrical battles in the streets of New York to the explosive rivalries of the 1990s, conflict has often fueled some of the genre's most memorable moments. But every generation eventually faces the same challenge: deciding where the line between entertainment and real-life consequences should be drawn. This particular feud forced fans to confront that question again. Was it simply another dramatic chapter in hip-hop's long history of rivalries? Or was it a warning sign about how quickly things can spiral when social media amplifies every insult and every reaction? Or, and maybe the most interesting part of the entire story is this: there may never be a clear winner. 50 Cent continues building his media empire. T.I. remains one of the most respected voices from Atlanta's golden era. King Harris is still carving out his identity as an artist and a son defending his family. And Boosie continues speaking bluntly about the cultural codes he believes hip-hop should never forget. But the emotional echoes of the conflict remain. Because long after the internet moves on to the next viral controversy, the deeper questions from this moment still linger. Was this simply a young man standing up for his mother? Did the feud cross a line that hip-hop should never cross? Or did the entire situation reveal something bigger about how the culture is changing? And now the conversation belongs to you. If you were in King Harris's position, would you have responded the same way when someone disrespected your mother in front of millions of people? Or do you think some lines should never be crossed, no matter how angry you are? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The debate around this story is far from over, and the hip-hop community wants to hear what you think. And if you want more deep breakdowns of the biggest controversies shaking the culture right now, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story when it drops. Because in hip-hop, the drama never really ends. It just waits for the next headline.